Donald Trump made headlines in the 70s after being sued for refusing to rent to black people. And now, as president, he's making headlines for preventing enforcement of laws that prevent discrimination in housing. My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. He's bringing it full circle. Whistleblowers have come forward with dozens of pages of internal communications at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they have provided interviews to the New York Times expressing alarm at the Trump administration's interference with the enforcement of the Fair Housing Act, which prevents discrimination on the basis of race, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, and disability. Now, we're going to get to some of the disturbing details in this essential reporting from the New York Times, where they say, quote, interviews and internal documents show that signature civil rights protections in housing are being dismissed as ideologically driven and DEI in disguise. But it's important to highlight that this is really where Donald Trump started his career: discrimination in housing. Let's just jump right into the history here. Look at this headline. This is from the New York Times from October 16th, 1973. Major landlord accused of anti-black bias in the city. Quote, the Department of Justice, charging discrimination against blacks in apartment rentals, brought suit in federal court in Brooklyn yesterday against the Trump Management Corporation, a major owner and manager of real estate here. The corporation, which owns and rents more than 14,000 apartments in Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, was accused of violating the Fair Housing Act of 1968 in its operation of 39 buildings. Most are in Coney Island, Brooklyn, and the Jamaica Estates and Forest Hills, Queens. Now, this is remarkable for several reasons. Donald Trump has such a lengthy history with racism, and yet we still have arguments about whether he's racist. How much evidence over how many decades do people need? Listen, I believe people can change. Okay, I believe in the power of change. I have changed. I have seen people change in my work as a therapist. I believe it's possible. I know it's possible. But this is a man who has been like this for his entire life. And he's now 80 years old. And instead of having conditions that may prompt change, like experiencing consequences or having people around you that tell you, they can't be in a relationship with you if you're going to be a nightmare, he is only more powerful and rewarded for his bad behavior and surrounded by bootlickers who are desperate to maintain proximity to power. I mean, the accusations here are that the Trump management company refused to rent to people based on their race and color, that they provided different rental terms and conditions based on race and color, and that they told black people rental units were not available when they were then offering them to white people. And I want to read to you this quote from Donald Trump in 1973, and you tell me who it sounds like. Speaking about the charges here, quote, they are absolutely ridiculous, he said. We have never discriminated, and we never would. There have been a number of local actions against us, and we've won them all. That sounds like 2025 Donald Trump, right? Still fielding accusations of illegal behavior, still playing the victim, still acting like he's defeating all these evil forces that falsely accuse and seek to take him down because he's almighty and powerful. In 1973, accused of violating the Fair Housing Act, now in 2025, now president, gutting the Fair Housing Act to make discrimination in housing easier. Are we noticing a pattern? Just look at this from 2016. When reporters did a deep dive into Donald Trump's history as a landlord. No vacancies for blacks. How Donald Trump got his start and was first accused of bias. Quote, looking back, Mr. Trump's response to the lawsuit can be seen as presaging his handling of subsequent challenges in business and in politics. Rather than quietly trying to settle, as another New York developer had done a couple of years earlier, he turned the lawsuit into a protracted battle, complete with angry denials, character assassination, charges that the government was trying to force him to rent to, quote, welfare recipients, and a $100 million countersuit accusing the Justice Department of defamation. When it was over, Mr. Trump declared victory, emphasizing that the consent decree he ultimately signed did not include an admission of guilt. But an investigation by the New York Times, drawing on decades-old files from the New York City Commission on Human Rights, internal Justice Department records, court documents, and interviews with tenants, civil rights activists, and prosecutors, uncovered a long history of racial bias at his family's properties in New York and beyond. And the broader history here is that the Fair Housing Act of 1968 passes, but there was no forced desegregation in the housing market. Landlords still prevented Black people from obtaining rental units. That is until activists started setting up experiments to expose people like the Trumps, who were accused of refusing to follow the law. After a Black person would be turned away from the rental property after being told that there were no vacancies, activist organizations would send white people to inquire about housing. Reading again from the New York Times reporting here from 2016, quote, everything was sort of whispers and innuendo, and you wanted to try to bring it out into the open, recalled Phyllis Kirschenbaum, who volunteered for Operation Open City, a housing rights advocacy organization. Quote, I'd walk in with my freckles and red hair and Jewish name and get an apartment immediately. The complaints of discrimination were not limited to New York. In 1969, a young Black couple, Haywood and Rennell Cash, sued after being denied a home in Cincinnati at one of the first projects in which Donald Trump, fresh out of college, played an active role. Mr. Cash was repeatedly rejected by the Trumps' rental agent, according to court records and notes kept by Housing Opportunities Made Equal of Cincinnati, which sent in white testers posing as a young couple while Mr. Cash waited in the car. After the agent, Irving Wolper, offered the testers an apartment, they brought in Mr. Cash. Mr. Wolper grew furious, shoving them out of the office and calling the young female tester, Maggie Durham, a, quote, inward lover, according to court records. Quote, to this day, I have not forgotten the fury in his voice and in his face, Miss Durham recalled recently, adding that she also remembered him calling her a traitor to the race. Traitor to the race. That racist who abused people trying to obtain housing, later praised by Trump as a fabulous man, an amazing manager, a classic, he said. I guess a classic vile racist. Yes, Donald. The reporting here shows it wasn't just New York. It wasn't just Ohio. It was also Virginia. Wherever there were Trump properties, there was discrimination based on race. Now, after all of Trump's posturing, he ultimately signed a consent decree that required Trump properties to be desegregated. But just a few years later, Trump was accused of violating that consent decree after allowing more Black people to rent his properties, but to only rent specific properties, where tenants then complained of poor and unsanitary conditions like blood-stained floors. So this is the history of how Donald Trump made a name for himself in real estate. And now that he's president, it appears that he's carrying forward his contempt, the contempt that he holds for the Fair Housing Act. We know that he loves to hold grudges. Who knew you could hold a grudge for the Fair Housing Act? So what exactly are these new accusations against Donald Trump? Reading again from this month's reporting from the New York Times, quote, in interviews, half a dozen current and former employees of HUD's Fair Housing Office said that the Trump political appointees had made it nearly impossible for them to do their jobs, which involve investigating and prosecuting landlords, real estate agents, lenders, and others who discriminated based on race, religion, gender, family status, or disability. Several lawyers said they had been blocked from communicating with clients without approval from a Trump appointee and had been barred from citing some past housing civil rights cases when researching legal precedent for possible new prosecutions. One internal memo from a top Trump appointee in the office said that archival documents that were, quote, contrary to administration policy would be removed or replaced and that, quote, tenuous theories of discrimination would no longer be pursued. Now, what exactly is a tenuous theory of discrimination to an administration run by white power activists? This reporting notes that some of the gutting here is credited to Doge, Elon Musk's Doge, which, interestingly, they note that federal offices that faced staffing reductions because of Doge lost 10% of their employees on average. The Office of Fair Housing, totally different story. 65%. They had 31 employees in January, and that will soon be only 11. This number includes just 6 lawyers tasked with handling fair housing cases. That number was 22 before cuts. How is this impacting the number of cases the office is handling? Quote, charges of discrimination are also sharply down. When investigators find evidence of a crime, they issue a formal document that requires the accused to appear before a judge. On an average year, HUD issues 35 charges. Since the beginning of the Trump administration, there have been 4, according to lawyers in the office. The slowdown can be traced, at least in part, to new procedures that stripped career officials of the authority to approve settlements or issue charges, said Ms. Gage, a career employee for the past 13 years. Instead, only a small number of Trump appointees now have that authority. Hundreds of pending fair housing cases were frozen, and some settlements revoked, even when accusations of discrimination had been substantiated, according to the interviews and the internal communications. In one instance, a large homeowners association in Texas was found to have banned the use of housing vouchers by Black residents. That case had been referred to the Justice Department, but the referral was abruptly withdrawn by the new Trump appointees. So Trump gets to decide which cases will be charged and which will not be charged. And how do we think Trump and his hand-select appointees will go about this decision-making process? Based on his lengthy history of racism and current attacks on DEI, which again are another part of his lifelong pattern of racism. This not only impacts discrimination based on race, but this reporting also notes that roughly 500 women file complaints with HUD under the Violence Against Women Act annually, seeking protection in housing after violence in relationships. But there are now only 2 lawyers who have the experience to take these cases. This is what we get when we allow a morally repugnant man back into power. We know Donald Trump is working overtime, not just to remove protections from discrimination in housing, but to further criminalize the homeless, as we've seen with his approach to homeless encampments here in DC, and also potentially putting millions of people on the street by stripping them of housing support. And don't forget, in August, the Trump administration announced it was seeking to eliminate a Biden administration rule requiring public housing agencies and property owners to give 30-day notices before evicting people from some federally subsidized housing, dropping that notice requirement to 14 days. Why? Endless contempt for people in poverty. Endless contempt for people who do not come from generational wealth. Endless contempt for people who weren't born with a gaudy golden spoon in their mouth. And as we face this continued fascist takeover, I hope that more and more people will see how they are personally caught up in this trap, personally impacted. Is it tragic that they didn't see that before? Yes, it is. Do we need people to join this movement in order to defeat fascism? Yes. Is that more important than dwelling on the frustration that they didn't see it earlier? Yes. So share this video with someone who needs to know not just the history here, but how the history directly connects to Donald Trump's current actions. This New York Times article didn't even mention Donald Trump's history with the Fair Housing Act, if you can believe it. Wild, I know. As always, I'd love to hear from you on this. Please share your thoughts in the comment below or call and leave me a voicemail of fewer than 3 minutes at 202-656-1509 or send an email to info@thepageperspective.com. You can always support my work by becoming a channel member. All you have to do is click the join button below for as little as $1.99 a month, or you can go to patreon.com/idoubtitpodcast. Follow me on social media at Brittany Page, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads. And as always, thank you for being here. Take care, and I will see you next time.